The Fire Service Association of Trinidad and Tobago presents Fire Call. Wednesday mornings at 10:30 as they discuss the major issues affecting the nation's fire service and its 2nd Division officers and issues that impact public safety and security. Join the conversation and add your perspective as we seek to improve the working conditions of fire officers and address the safety needs of our changing society. Fire Call. Fire Call. Presented by the Fire Service Association of Trinidad and Tobago. Wednesday mornings at 10:30 on Power 102 FM, empowering you.
Asha, morning. Morning, Batch. Morning, Jimmy.
Ring,
Jimmy Lawrence,
telephone ring. Is Dale from Power 102 calling?
Don't afraid
I
to come
know
in.
from a meeting in the chief
Afraid to call.
office. I feel so proud of the fire service. So I'm going on radio and tell the nation about your 50th anniversary celebration. I said before you put your foot in your mouth, we ain't have
Let's share
nothing
be like,
much
let's share
to
be
be
like.
proud about. Did some women sleeping with cockroach and rat? And administration ain't care a thing about that. Endless mosquitoes all over Cuba. The men lives under threat from dengue fever. So I say wait, they lean up wait. Let me put the damn record straight. Take it from me in my calypso. Before you go and talk on the radio.
And of course, this is where we talk with
Yeah,
the
shop missing.
Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service Association.
Oh,
Of course, Mr. Leo Ramke soon joins us in between here.
See you, man.
And it's always my pleasure to have him inside. He's been here very early today. Mr. Ramke, good morning to you and welcome.
Morning, comrade, Sir Charles. Morning to all your listeners, the listening public out there. Morning to all the fire officers locked on. Yeah, man.
How has it been?
Well, Sir Charles, another week has passed, and well, last week he wasn't here. We had the holiday.
Right.
You know what I mean? We celebrated that Emancipation Day. However, we are back here again to raise the issues, even in the midst of the whole discussion that is taking place today on 102 FM. Very, very interesting discussion. And we await to see how it is treated with when the political directorate, assesses the voice of the people. We just hope that the voice of the people reigns supreme at all times and is the voice of God.
Well, I'm hoping that with the changes that are being made, that at least now we are hoping that we now have a new national security minister that is responsible for what goes on with the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service also.
Correct.
And I'm hoping that in this dispensation, that unlike the last situation where you I think you all met like what, once?
Yes.
Right?
Once with Mr. Dillon.
Right. So I'm hoping that now that you all will be able to meet, and not just meet, but get what you all have been asking for now.
Correct. Well, let me take the opportunity immediately to, on behalf of the Fire Service Association and all its members, congratulate Minister Stuart Young for his appointment. Many regard him as the super minister. We have to congratulate him for inspiring the confidence of the Prime Minister to appoint him to a ministry which would arguably be the most important ministry in terms of the public's interest at this time, given the state of crime and safety and so on in the country. So, he has so far demonstrated a high degree of responsibility and on the ground, and he is a person that clearly shows that he is willing to do things that others may not be willing to do. So we are hopeful, we are optimistic that he will treat with the fire service in at least better than the last minister, because it was, we would have complained here on many occasions that last minister really ignored us. Even though we would have begged and pleaded for some attention to be paid to the issues in the fire service, we were ignored. But we still are a bit concerned, given that this minister, even though he is regarded as a super minister, he has two other portfolios, if I'm to understand it correctly, under his purview: communication, as well as minister in the ministry of in the office of the Prime Minister. And it's more work. And what tends to happen is that the issues affecting fire officers, given that the Ministry of National Security is responsible for prisons, police, defense force, and fire, and other agencies and so on, sometimes the issues that affect fire service tend to get lost in the grand scheme of national security. So we are hopeful that this minister will find a balance and be able to treat with fire service in a more satisfactory manner.
Yeah, well, you guys, you all sound very optimistic about this minister coming in now. So I'm hoping that he really takes the opportunity to embrace the fire service and start to treat with the issues that you all have, because your concerns are not just about the fire service and about the officers, but really about the safety of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm hoping that they recognize that and start to pay a little attention to you guys.
Well, for us, Sir Charles, hope springs eternal, as they say. And we are hopeful. All signs indicate that he's a very capable minister. When we look at it, he comes from a legal background, so we are hopeful that there would be some balance there, in terms of, because you remember our issues, most of our issues are based on entitlements in law which are being denied. So we are hopeful a legal mind would be able to see the importance of upholding the law, insofar as our terms and conditions of employment and so on is concerned. So we try to look at the glass half full. But Sir Charles, our discussions this morning, the road that we want to go down is to discuss the Public Service Commission and its role towards the administration of the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service. And let me say from the onset that, we didn't just bring them up. It is our view that the Public Service Commission is failing to adequately oversee the human resource management of the fire service. The Public Service Commission deals with human resource management. So the Public Service Commission deals with promotions in the fire service, acting appointments, recruitment, discipline, and so on. And when they fail to adequately manage these functions, by the way, that are in most instances delegated to the head of department, the chief fire officer, when they as a Public Service Commission fail to ensure and fail to play their role in the whole administering of these functions, transfers, promotions, acting appointments, and so on, it leads to a breakdown in the management of the service, thereby creating demotivation, demoralization, and the public suffers.
Right.
Not to mention, a lot of public funds are really wasted in litigation in the courts and so on. Right? So we have the issue of promotions, which ultimately the Public Service Commission is responsible for. Yes, the Chief Fire Officer has a role, but ultimately the Constitution, the Public Service Commission regulations, points and gives the ultimate authority to the Public Service Commission to ensure that promotions are done in keeping with the requirements of the law. And here we have promotions are in fact unduly delayed for years at a time in the fire service. The promotion before the last one, which was in 2016, took place in 2010. So you talk about a 6-year period between promotions. And the one before that would have taken place somewhere at 2005 and so on. So you have undue delays. Approvals for acting appointments. Now officers are given acting appointments because the promotions not being made. then you have to put persons to act. And when the acting comes about, the approvals that are required from the Public Service Commission, after the chief fire officer having appointed persons to act, the approvals from the commission so that the officers could get their pay for acting is long in coming, sometimes decades, Sir Charles. In fact, I have officers who have retired, gone home, years upon years, still being owed acting allowances for duties they performed while they were active in the service. And the same goes for the officers who are active right now. They are called, they are asking, what is up with my acting appointment? Right. Some of them acted for years, then got promoted and still waiting on that acting compensation for while they were acting at the time. You know, so it's really deplorable. Disciplinary matters are duly delayed as well. Justice delayed is justice denied. Right? It's very similar to the justice system that we hear the public complaining about. It's very similar to what's happening in the service with the disciplinary process. Recruitment. So Charles, we come here every Wednesday and we talk about the service being 500 officers short, quarter of the service, quarter of the established service is short. So the public is suffering because of this. What is the net effect? The net effect is that the entire service is demoralized and demotivated. Now we represent the 2nd Division, but I would say categorically that it's the entire service, fire service, 1st and 2nd Division, that is demoralized and demotivated. It's clear. You just have, I mean, those of us who reside within the service would know. All officers are demoralized. I mean, all these luminaries and all these persons holding high offices, they would have done a study in management and they would understand the Herzberg theory, the 2-factor theory, hygiene and motivation. And there are certain things that motivate people and certain things that satisfy but don't necessarily motivate people. So you have job security. I mean, if you examine the fire service, you will see that there's a high degree of dissatisfaction as well as demotivation. So the 2-factor theory could clearly show you that the service is in a bad place insofar as human resources and how you manage the psyche of people and so on in the service. And it is because of the shortcomings in these areas. Officers are not being recognized properly. They are not given the responsibility officially by being promoted. All these are motivation factors. They are not, so they won't be motivated. They're not experiencing advancement in the job. Okay? There's an absence of policy, you know, quality of supervision. A lot of these characteristics of the theory, the Herzberg theory, is absent. So what Herzberg said about this: to improve job attitude and productivity, administrators must recognize and attend to both sets of characteristics and not assume that an increase in satisfaction leads to decrease in dissatisfaction. Frederick Herzberg. Now, Sir Charles, to support what I'm saying, I wanted just to pause a bit and read just briefly, there's a few lines from an article that was printed in The Guardian. I think a similar article was printed in the Newsday as well. It was published on Friday, August the 3rd, 2018. And the title of the article is Judge Knocks Promotion System. A High Court judge has ordered the Public Service Commission to reconsider retroactively promoting a former fire officer who had been bypassed for promotion. So there's a retired officer. Okay. Justice Frank Sipasad made the order as he delivered a 14-page judgment in favor of Rudolph Charles in the Port of Spain High Court on Tuesday. So I'm not going to read the whole article, but to discuss the case, but I wanted to get the salient issue as it relates to what we're discussing. In his judgment, CPASAD criticized the commission for failing to make promotions for almost 7 years. The commission had claimed that it was delayed by the failure of the chief fire officer to provide it with a merit list for promotions. Such a lax, now this is quotation mark, open quotation marks, such a lax and inactive position must be condemned. But under the existing system, its inaction was permissible as it retains control over its process and virtue of its own regulation. Had to await receipt of the list from the chief fire officer, CPASAD said. Describing the situation as unacceptable, CPASAD suggested that reform is overdue and necessary. CPASAD said the inaction of the commission, the absence of the administrative accountability, the archaic nature of service commission's operation, and the reprehensible delay in the discharge of its mandate demonstrate the need for an urgent review of the role and efficacy of the commission and of service commissions in general. If as a society the goal is productivity and progress, then the antiquated and inherited structures and systems of government have to be replaced, he said. So, Sir Charles, this case would have really established what we are trying to say today, and we support exactly what the Honorable Judge is saying. He is saying that the Public Service Commission needs to address it. It's, probably the Public Service Commission could offer some excuse or some reason why it's happening. Sometimes we hear that it's a lack of resources. They themselves have human resource issues. They are understaffed. We don't know exactly what the issues could be. I've heard in other quarters that the entire system itself is outdated and there's need for reform. We don't know. But it doesn't only affect the fire service, it affects the public service. But I would dare to say that it affects the fire service more so because generally the thought process in the wider public perception is that, the issues of safety, of preparedness is not as important as the immediate issues that affect you from day to day.
Yeah. But I think it's also, it's a sad day when, you're getting no explanation for things that are not happening. I think there should always be an explanation, whether it be finance, whether it be lack of resource, whatever it is. That line of communication needs to be clear. And if it is clear, then people will know in their mind, well, look, we can't do it now because of what is happening. But to say nothing.
Certainly, I agree with you. If it's only natural. If something happens to you and you are explained and given a reason as to why something has happened to you, it would, ease the stress that you would be under. But at the same time, the issue still remains that in law, the things that we are complaining about, it exists in law, and there are entitlements, there are requirements, there are terms and conditions of employment. You understand? They are your legal rights and privileges. It's not something that you are asking for, in the form of a favor or so. You are asking that your terms and conditions of employment be protected. And the officers are clearly being denied that if the law says that, for example, for promotions, when an office becomes vacant, a mechanism is supposed to be triggered to fill that vacancy within 14 days. And that is simply not happening. And the commission, going to the courts when it does reach to the court and saying to the court, well, we didn't receive, the mechanism wasn't triggered by the head of department, so we couldn't do anything, is not good enough.
That is not good.
They are supposed, because their powers have been delegated to the head of department, they also have a responsibility, and it's there, you know. A report from that head of department is supposed to be given to the commission on a periodic basis. And if that report is not coming, or if they receive that report and the responsibility is not being upheld properly by the head of department, some form of action is implied. That is why they ask for the report to be submitted to the commission, not for the commission to receive the report or hear the cries of the workers in the organization and ignore it because the law says that they have delegated the power, so that's the end of it. No, the commission has a responsibility. The buck stops with the commission.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that a lot better has to be done. And, you know, although the buck stops with the commission, I think the Prime Minister and the President also has a role to play. If what is the system, the existing system is not working, then they too have some action that they need to trigger to fix this problem and not just ignore it as well. You know, yeah. So Charles, I would like you to open the lines. You know, let's take a few calls. I don't know if persons would want to lend any contributions to this discussion.
All right. Well, the lines are open. People are 222-8255, 612-8255, and of course we are to Mr. Leo Robinson. He's the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service Association. And it's Fire Call. This is what we do on our Wednesday here at Power 102 FM. So the lines are open now, so you can chime in on the show.
Yes, man. We're discussing this morning Public Service Commission, the failures of the Public Service Commission to adequately oversee the human resource management in the fire service, insofar as promotions on a timely basis, acting appointments, approvals for acting appointments, disciplinary matters, recruitment, all these issues. And remember, the net effect is that the entire service becomes demoralized. In other words, officers, you know, they try and they try. You're going to have pockets of officers who are self-motivated, and they will continue to work in the interest of the public. But by and large, the nature of man is that if you don't provide the workers, the officers, with what they are entitled to in the terms and conditions, they become demoralized and demotivated. There's no advancement. And then who suffers? The public is going to suffer because you are going to get a substandard service, right? I'm not saying that is what the public is receiving, right? That is a whole different assessment has to be done to establish that. But I'm saying officers are certainly demoralized and they are demotivated. And further, what is even more troubling in my view in these economic times, in these difficult economic times, when the Public Service Commission and their failures to ensure that these functions are done and officers receive their entitlements, they are taken to task in the courts, and it's public funds that have to be spent to defend those failures. And here you have a judge that has been knocking, has been criticizing, have been basically condemning that inadequacy and that failure, and yet still the issue is not being fixed. It's not the first time a court would have, you know, found that the commission would have been found wanting. And, you know, that is unacceptable. When the amount of funds that is being expended on litigation that could have been avoided, then, you know, that is a sad day for Trinidad and Tobago and our funds. So Charles, that is the issue we're looking at today with respect to the Public Service Commission and how it relates to the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service. You understand? So I'm hopeful, Sir Charles, that given that we have a new Minister of National Security, and given that he, you know, has a legal background, he is learned in the field of law. He's a qualified lawyer. You know, he served in the ministry as a minister in the Ministry of the Attorney General. So he very well versed in that field. We are hopeful that he could find a way to intervene. He certainly has the ear of our Prime Minister, and I am hopeful that he could at some point intervene on behalf of fire officers and not follow the path that the previous national security and other being fair, other Minister of National Securities has gone down the path where, you know, they sort of sidestep the fire service from time to time, and they look at the other issues that come into the public limelight. And that agency called the fire service, you know, is sometimes regarded as not as important.
Yeah.
And only when the flooding taking place and the, you know, the hurricane and earthquakes and the fires and all the different things start to occur, then we start to see the importance of the fire service and the preparedness that is required. So I am hopeful that this Minister of National Security would take an all-encompassing approach and really deal with the fire service, at least give the Fire Service Association a listening ear, you know, sit with us, talk with us. Many of the issues that we have to, you know, resort to bringing up in the public domain could be dealt with, you know, behind closed doors, so that we could really treat with the issues of public awareness about safety and so on, and not have to go to deal with the issues where fire officers themselves are being affected. So Charles, aside from these things, I'm hopeful that on our next program, as we come to the close of the program, I'm hoping that in our next program, we would be able to address some very, very important issues. And I see one of the Facebook posts there, and that is one of the issues, which is the medical director, the requirement for a medical director in the fire service. And we discussed that week before last week. And we were hopeful that we will discuss that again, because with this Minister of National Security, I am hoping to see a different view coming from him with the importance of the medical director, because the public is affected when the fire service doesn't have a medical director on board to ensure that the protocols and the policies that fire officers use to operate emergency medical care and emergency pre-hospital care is of the highest standard, in keeping with what the Emergency Ambulance Services Act would have set out to establish. So that is one other issue that we want to deal with. I'm hoping also that the minister looks upon the absorption of auxiliary firefighters as something that could be expedited, at least look at bringing them into the service in the shortest possible time to augment the strength of the fire service. It would be an advantage for the state to utilize these persons and appoint them into the fire service, given that they have already been trained, they already have some uniforms and so on. Bring them into the service and let them operate. Is a win-win situation. And finally, the issue of the pensioners, such as the retirees. I can't call all of them pensioners, because the truth is that many of them don't even receive a pension. They retired and they're not receiving a pension, even though legally they're entitled to it. Right? Again, I'm hoping that Minister Stuart Young, if you're listening or your agents are listening, this is an issue, and we have already gone and engaged the courts. I'm hoping that this issue could be dealt with. We could take a different approach and we could fix it, because it's retirees we are talking about. Yes, Dale, I see that uniform, personal protective equipment is another issue. All these issues we need to deal with right here. Hopefully, at some later point, we would be able to bring up those issues and deal with them in detail. But I want to give the Chief Fire Officer a chance to be able to address some of those issues before we air them. So the issues we air in here would be issues that clearly it's out of the hands of the Chief Fire Officer, and he cannot deal with it any further.
Well, I'm hoping that it's a dawning of a new day for the fire service of Trinidad and Tobago and the people of Trinidad and Tobago, because whether people recognize it or not, this is not just an essential service, it's a very essential service.
Correct, Sir Charles.
So let's hope for the best there.
Correct. We appreciate that, Sir Charles. So, as we go, again, let's congratulate the Minister. And Minister, even before you receive the letter from us, we have already drafted and finalizing letters to come to you, requesting a meeting to deal with the issues that we had pending with the last minister that were unresolved and undealt with. So I'm hoping, Minister Stuart Young, we're hoping to get a meeting with you at your earliest convenience to deal with some priority issues.
Great. Leo, thank you very much for passing through, and we look forward to talking with you guys next week, Wednesday.
Yeah, man. Blessings.
The fireman